Order. All rise.
Sorry, it's fine. I'll go straight up. That's fine. That's fine. You want to seat me? That's fine. Let us pray. As we gather in this honorable chamber on the Tuesday of Holy Week, remind us, O Lord, that you taught us to know that anyone who must be first must become last and be the true servant of all. Grant to those who lead our nation the spirit of service, that following the example of your Son, they may have courage to distinguish between what is popular and what is right, the openness to learn from the ideas and policies of others, and the compassion to seek, most of all, to serve those who have the least. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This house is in session. Minutes of the meeting held on Monday, 2nd of March, 2026, to be deferred.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The said minutes, pardon? The question is that the minutes held on Monday, the 2nd of March, 2026, to be deferred. All those in questions, please. All those in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Announcements by Your Honor, the Deputy Speaker. Messages from His Excellency, the President. Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
So, Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that those standing orders so mentioned be suspended for the remainder of the day. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 2, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, to move the second reading of the State Acquisition and Vesting of Property Bill 2026.
Honourable Member for St. Michael West.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I was privileged to have blessed 7 pensioners last year as my first act as Minister of Housing. And that was done under the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act. Possibly transferring, free of cost, to these 7 pensioners, empowering them, their families, and correcting a wrong that had persisted for generations. Today, sir, I get to come to this place and bring a bill that is simple in purpose, but powerful in its impact. For decades, thousands of Barbadians have lived in National Housing Corporation homes. They paid their rent, they raised their children, they maintained their communities. But despite all that, they never owned the homes that they lived in. And quite frankly, sir, that is not right. This government believes in something very simple, sir. If you have lived in a home, paid for it, and honored your obligations, you deserve the dignity of home ownership. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, legislation was passed to allow tenants to receive their homes, but the process, quite frankly, has been way too slow. Out of nearly 4,000 eligible homes, just over 500 have been transferred. This means that thousands of families are still waiting, sir, still hoping, still unable to use their homes as collateral, still unable to pass them securely on to their children, securing intergenerational wealth, sir. Mr. Speaker, the problem that existed is that under this legislation, the framework required case-by-case conveyancing, resulting in significant administrative delays, high legal costs, and technical compliance burdens, hence resulting in low completion rates. One of the reasons for that delay is important to understand. Under the existing law, a tenant could only receive their home if every condition was met. This bill changes that decisively. This bill uses the authority of the Constitution to transfer ownership directly, remove administrative bottlenecks, and deliver justice to those who have already earned it, sir. It does something bold but fair. The state acquires the land and immediately gives it to the people who already qualify via the vehicle of the state. No long delays, no complicated paperwork, no uncertainty, but certainty in the process, sir. And let me be clear. Let me be crystal clear. This is not giving away anything unfairly. This is not a political favor, as you shall see shortly. This is not new eligibility. This is about people who have already qualified. These people who meet the criteria, pay their dues, lived within the system. Eligibility is grounded in the NHC Transfer of Terrace Units Act 2013, which is based on 20 years of occupancy or equivalent discharge of obligations, good financial standing, so that quite simply means you pay your rent, compliance with structural and statutory requirements, and now deserve the outcome that was always promised. Mr. Speaker, what does this mean in real terms? What this bill does is simple. It replaces delay with delivery. And what it creates is powerful. Security for families, opportunity for investment. We know what property can do for you. Stability for communities. It represents a transformational housing policy intervention aimed at ending renting for life. You would have heard the Prime Minister say this all the time. Rent is dead money. And sir, we take this seriously in the Ministry of Housing. I certainly do. And I know that the Cabinet does. That we will be engaging not only in bringing what I consider to be innovative legislative schemes. We're known for that, sir. All the debt for swaps that we have done, debt for nature. We have always been innovative in the way we approach legislation. And I can tell you, sir, that even in our administrations of the rental of government departments, ministries, rent is dead money. And the ministry will be looking at entering into bold arrangements so that we can own the property eventually. We also pay out way too much insurance. And we're looking at innovative ways at which we can also reform that. And all of this means together, Mr. Speaker, is that this government, through the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, is looking to spend the money of the people in a more efficient and better way. Mr. Speaker, a house without title is shelter. A house without title, with title, sorry, sir, is power. Power to build, power to borrow, power to pass on to the next generation, sir. And we are placing that power in the hands of the Barbadian people. This is not just housing. This is wealth creation. This is economic empowerment. And that is what this party is about, sir. Economic empowerment of our people. We've done it time and time again in here. We will do so through education transformation as well, so that we can more tailor our educational system so that our people can gain the skills necessary so that they can hit the new economies, this new global economy effectively. We already know that we do not possess currently the skills necessary to match the global construction boom, for the local construction boom. And I know that my colleague right here that sits next to me will discharge in this capacity in a very great way. Sir, this is one of the most important features of the bill. It regularizes ownership where the original tenant has died as well. And in the schedule to the bill, you will see that there are a lot of deceased persons. And I can tell you it's frustrating for me that a lot of these units are just sitting there caught in legal limbo. But sir, these units now, with this legislation, enables the transfer of wealth from the estate to the people, to their families, sir. Transfer to heirs. It will allow them to have mortgage eligibility, clear title issuance, sir. Mr. Speaker, this is about securing legacy, about the transference of wealth, supporting our mandate as a Barbados Labour Party government of helping to facilitate generational wealth. Sir, you've heard the Prime Minister say this over and over again. In these same hallowed halls, we passed the 1661 Slave Code. But I get to come here today and help to facilitate intergenerational wealth for our people in this country. Now, some may ask, what about order? What about standards, sir? We have addressed that in this bill. This bill includes clear rules. Homes must remain residential. Communities must be maintained. Public access and utilities are protected. Nuisance and neglect are controlled. Mr. Speaker, we protect community standards, public access, infrastructure, and utilities, because ownership must come with responsibility, sir. So while we give ownership, we also protect the integrity of our communities. Sir, easements are a necessity and preserved in common law, and that is maintained in this bill. The restrictive covenants, such as a detailed covenant regime, governs residential use, maintenance standards, nuisance prevention, and infrastructure protection. It's all covered, sir. Sir, the scope of this bill is all over this country, as was a schedule to the original 2013 bill. It includes Deacon's Farm. Mr. Speaker, I had the honor of speaking at your meeting in the farm during the election, and I had the bill in my phone. And it was a privilege for me to call a few names on there in that community while they were there. It's a little more complicated to do it here, calling their names, but I had the privilege of doing that. And I can tell you, sir, it was an honor to be able to do that, to look at your constituents and give them the good news that they will be owners of their units. In addition to Deacon Farm, sir, we have Grisettes. Of course. And in Grisettes, sir, I can tell you, in the communities of Grisettes, you have Denton Road, you have Lattice Lane, and you have Trellis Walk. 11 total units, sir.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, sir. And I can also tell you that we have a few more planned for the Honourable Member of St. Michael West Central in phase 2. Because we're not finishing here, sir. This will be a phased approach as we survey more and make sure that we have all our ducks in a row. Sir, the next phase will be northward of 600 units, sir. You will be happy to know that in Deacons, I got 107 plan more for you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I got 45 in Haynesville.
How many are Rosemont?
Rosemont, I got 6. But 107 and 6 is still a good number. Sir, for the Honourable Member of St. Michael Southeast, I have 93 in Bottom Close, Will D. I got 32 in Field Roll, Will D. I got 67 in Factory Avenue. I believe that's you, ma'am. I have 14 in Gall Hill. I got 77 in Silver Hill. And this is in the next phase, sir. I got 69 in Eden Lodge. Sir, I intend to do the dog here, sir, because the business of empowerment is empowerment for me. So, sir, in addition to what I have here, which is about 200 units attached to this schedule, we have more to come, sir. It was revealed that the number of eligible units throughout the 27 housing estates is around 3,892, and we can tackle all, sir. In fact, the Terrace Units Act is a bit limited in that when that was drafted and passed, it did not include everyone. I intend, sir, as the Minister of Housing, to amend that legislation so that we can get more on there, sir. We want to put more on there. We want to get units in Bush Hall, Flat Rock, and it would be remiss of me not to mention the terrace units in Country Park Towers, sir. They're not currently in the schedule of 2013, but we will add it by amending that legislation. In Deanstown, sir, we will add these areas to empower as many people as possible, sir. And, sir, I must say, this bill is about fairness. It is about correcting delay. It is about recognizing the quiet dignity of people who did everything right and are simply just waiting. I told you earlier about the people in River Bay. They were waiting for decades, sir. And we got to right a wrong for those people. And I know that the Honourable Member for St. Lucie will ask us, where are we with that? I promise you, sir, that we will have title for those people very, very soon. They have simply waited for too long. This government is saying the wait is over. We are turning tenants into owners. We are turning housing into assets. We are turning communities into engines of stability and pride. This bill says to the people of Barbados, we see you, we recognize your patience, and we honor your commitment. But, sir, I want to say here today that, as I said earlier, we know that rent is dead money. And I know that the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central will speak on this a bit, on the impact of too many homes going into the pool of Airbnb and driving up the cost of rent in this country, sir, further burdening our people. And I can tell you, I had to deal with 3 fires in the space of 3 weeks, sir. And it is frustrating as the Minister of Housing. Sometimes I can't even find accommodation for these displaced people. So when I turn to the Social Empowerment Agency, they've been doing a wonderful job, sir, in helping us to find allocations for these displaced people. But for them, it's also frustrating, sir, because when you call around, people would rather hold out on renting because they know they can get more money because you're in the season. And there's no way that they could afford some of these rents, sir. So quite frankly, sir, what we need to do is build, build, build. Because I know that this is a supply and demand issue. So the burden is on us. And me, Mr. Speaker, I am not running from that responsibility. I have to build. And the truth is, in a lot of instances, like in the Wellington Street project, we have to go up. We have to build up so that we can bring back people to that area after so many people were disenfranchised there, sir. Sir, at Vineyard, we are going to build, and the Honourable Member for St. George South knows this very well. We are going to build 1,200 homes down there. And we will aspire to build 20 houses a month down there. So when we break ground later this year, God willing, from next year, we could see 300-400 homes available to the good people in St. Philip and Barbados. And I know that Honourable Member for St. Philip North, which that area is in her constituency, will be extremely excited at the prospects of delivering housing solutions for her people, sir. But, sir, we know that because of the high rents and some of the low salaries, that is a mismatch, sir. So, as was said in the manifesto, the government is looking at ways in which we can de-risk mortgages, in ways that we can close the gap, sir, because a lot of people come to the National Housing Corporation and they qualify for $150,000 in a mortgage certificate. But, sir, when they do the final analysis, you take out the car loan, you take out the credit card, you take out the floor bill. What happened? You'd be lucky if you're left with $120. But, sir, we can help to close the gap, possibly, I'm just brainstorming, possibly by guaranteeing the deficiency, sir. Again, I say that this is the party that did the debt for nature swap, sir, the first in the world. Nothing is too big for this government, sir. So we're looking at many ways in which we can empower people. And during the estimates, we would have spoken a lot about the social mortgage program. And the truth is that every development we be looking to put in a certain percentage of stock towards the rent to own, sir, so that we can get a match where there's a tremendous mismatch in salary versus mortgage. Sir, this is our creed. This is our burden. And this Barbados Labour Party government has always stepped up to the plate for our people. It has been in the foundations of our great party. And as Minister, I support this recommendation that a two-pronged approach be taken in order to expedite the transfer of terrace units. The Attorney General has certified this bill and is in order for consideration by this Honourable House. Again, I support the passing of this bill to vest the units in the state and transfer the units to qualified tenants under the 20-year program. And, sir, with those few words, I beg that this bill do now pass.
You're the second time.
Sir, I beg that this bill be read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. All those members in favor, please say aye. Okay. Honourable Member for Christchurch, East Central.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise to also lend support to this bill in Parliament because, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael West indicated, sir, this has been one of the areas of enfranchisement that the Barbados Labour Party has been pursuing for some time. And notwithstanding our previous commitment with respect to persons having reached the 20-year milestone, we had originally asked, sir, that persons pay a deposit. And as the Honourable Member had indicated, for whatever reason, sir, the internal administration took much longer than it should have, sir. And then by the time we lost government in 2008, the previous administration then sought to, in effect, dismantle that specific policy and therefore created a situation where persons who were then subsequently reaching that 20-year mark were not required to pay the deposits in order to have the title transferred. And so when we came back into office in 2018, sir, we found a situation where people had paid money, sir, and not received any conveyance with respect to these properties. And some people who had not paid had in fact received the conveyances, sir, creating a lot of confusion. And so in the midst of all of what we were doing with respect to the restructuring of the debt, sir, and all of that, we in the Ministry of Finance, sir, and the government indicated that we would ensure that those persons who had in fact paid deposits, sir, that they receive those monies back to be consistent with what had taken place before. And whilst we are here today on this specific piece of legislation, I just want to say to my constituents in Wharton who will benefit from this particular piece of legislation today, that whilst the current resolution only speaks to some of the units from Block 1 to 16, I know that the Honourable Member and his team have been working on completing the surveys for Block 17 to 20, and that when we come to round 2, that those persons will be afforded the same benefit here who will be asking about me, sir, in 17 to 20. And therefore, I say to those residents that whilst this process, regrettably, sir, regrettably, has taken far too long for government to be able to deliver for people, that we believe in you, sir, through you, the people of Barbados, to be able to utilize these assets now to ensure that you can provide a better future for your families. What I would say, sir, is that I know that we, as a policy, we've committed to ensuring that the National Housing Corporation, as well as the Ministry of Housing, that we can also provide better estate planning advice for some of these beneficiaries, because it is going to be important, sir, that we advise people accordingly in terms of how to ensure that as you now become owners of these units, the mechanism through which then you can transfer that title now to the next generation, I think is going to be important, given the nature of the housing, the culture, I should say, with respect to these public housing areas. And therefore, we really need to make sure that as we are doing this very positive affirmative action, that we also support families as they now take ownership of these properties. One of the things that I hope the ministry will work with the planning department to do too is to ensure that if I now have access to my property, what will be permitted, sir, additional development as I want to increase the space for me and my family, so that it doesn't disadvantage the persons next door, and that there's a very clear sense that, as we would say, sir, when you catch your hand, that you already know, sir, what is permitted with respect to future development, because that is going to be key to ensuring that there's no chaos or confusion in relation to when people want to do better for themselves, sir, and their families. So I think this is really, sir, a very, very positive thing. I want to urge the Ministry of Housing, as well as the NHC, to quickly conclude the remainder of the survey, sir, so that ordinary Barbadians will be able to get on with the business within these housing developments, sir, with respect to improving their circumstances. I do know that with respect, as I announced in the budget, sir, as we are looking at ways to enhance how financing is done with respect to housing in the areas that I outlined, that these persons too will be able, with these conveyances, would be able to go to any financial institution under that similar framework and be able to access some resources, sir, to be able to improve their living conditions. And therefore, I think under a clearly defined framework designed for each property, each terrace unit, sir, that we will be able then to allow people greater certainty with respect to how they will live in the future. But this is something, sir, that I think is significant for the future of Barbados. It gives families right across the length and breadth, as the Honourable Member have stated, right across the length and breadth of this country, a genuine opportunity, sir, to be able to start to see a better connection, if you like, sir, with respect to owning a piece of the rock, as we would say it. And therefore, it is important that we conclude these legislative arrangements in the shortest possible time, provide those preliminary planning permissions, if you like, sir, with respect to what will be permissible under a particular regime, sir, and allow everybody the certainty with respect to how they will be able to improve their living conditions, as I said. Equally, sir, and I know that we all know that there are some communal issues that will have to be resolved, because obviously you have matters in relation to the maintenance of the sewage situation, and we've provided resources to enhance the sewering of all of these units over the course of the last few years. We have also, sir, upgraded, I think, the majority of the electrical upgrades in terms of these units over the course of the last few years, and we've done it sequentially, sir. I know that the NHC still has a few remaining to complete, sir, and therefore the government has taken what we believe, sir, is a very responsible approach to ensuring that as people are now able to accept the ownership of these structures, that they now have modern electrical supply in them, sir, as opposed to when they were originally constructed, sir, some in the 50s, some in the 60s, sir, as you well know. And therefore, we've been able to sequentially improve a lot of that infrastructure. So therefore, I'm happy, sir, to say that we have done well in relation to being able to support this housing initiative. And we want now Barbadians to be able to, as we would say, sir, take the baton and move ahead, sir, with respect to being able to expand the living accommodation for their families. It is going to be important, equally, sir, that as people improve their lot, and let me just say for the benefit of the Chamber, sir, that just more broadly, nothing to do specifically with the housing units in this instance, but we want people to be able to have greater understanding as to the value of their homes. And I want to encourage all those persons who are going to be the beneficiaries of these units, sir, to make sure that they start looking at things in relation to insurance and these matters, sir. Because at the end of the day, we have to, as homeowners, these are parts of the responsibility, sir, as homeowners that you should undertake, and therefore the capacity to be able to focus on these areas, sir, will be important, given that we are still focused on ensuring that we have climate resilience and resilience more broadly across the space, and therefore we will work with the Ministry of Housing to ensure then that we have, again, flexible arrangements with respect to being able to work with the insurance industry to see how persons now can access specific types of insurance for these types of properties, such that the risk is shared across the board, sir. And therefore, the government continues to work to ensure that we can make it as easy as possible for people to participate. Now, as I said earlier, sir, more broadly, this is a year where new land tax valuations will be done. I do not know that any of these properties will be valued specifically higher than $400,000, sir. As you know, from April 1st, which is tomorrow, sir, the land tax threshold will increase to $400,000. That is not to say that there may not be a unit or two that if people decide to invest in, sir, that they couldn't reach that particular threshold. And I certainly would want people to improve their lot, which is why, as I said, in relation to what is permitted for future development, that how people utilize, sir, these assets will be critically important for how their family's financial future, sir, I believe, will be secured. And therefore, we want to see people invest in not just building up the living accommodation, but to recognize that by making these investments right across the board, sir, that the value of this asset that you are now going to have, sir, will, in of its own, increase in value. And therefore, we have to understand not just the valuation side with respect to if someone wants to sell it, sir, if you want to insure your property, you got to make sure that you understand what is required to be able to replace that property, sir. And therefore, it is important that we have a synchronization, sir, of these issues, so that as people take ownership, that they understand, sir, how to utilize these assets to the best, to the benefit, I should say, of their families. And therefore, getting this type of estate planning awareness and education in place is going to be important to allowing a number of these families to be able, not, as I said, not just to own piece of the rock, not just to expand and have better living conditions for their families, but how do you use these assets now, sir, to be able to build a better future for your family. And so, sir, this is a monumental piece of legislation. I hope that my honourable friend recognizes the work that he has brought to this place today. The people of Barbados who have lived across these public estates deserve to be in a position, sir, to benefit from the long investment in public housing. And therefore, as we seek to transform Barbados, this is just one of those pieces of the puzzle, sir, in relation in how we, in this government, intends to transform the economy. When we speak, sir, of an inclusive recovery, as we now convey these properties, sir, and people know as they catch their hands, sir, to be able to invest in this, this is part of the inclusive part of the recovery, sir, because having people at the center of the public policy, that has been our mantra from the beginning, sir, and therefore it is important that people not see this as something that is political, sir. This is how Barbadians are going to invest in their future, in the future of their family, sir, and allowing us to all have a sense of responsibility in relation to how the future of the country, in relation to governance. And therefore, we are committed to ensuring that not just with respect to empowerment, but enfranchisement and supporting families, sir, to be able to see a better life for all of our people. And so, sir, I am happy to support this bill today. I only urge the Ministry of Housing to advance the conclusion of the remainder of the surveys so that, as I said, sir, my people in Block 17 to 20 don't ask me later about them. Because, and as I'm sure other members will face the same question, but we simply took a decision that you can't wait for everything to be complete and having some people wait longer than they needed to wait, sir. And that is the only reason, sir, that we're here today with this phase one, part one, sir. And therefore, I hope that next week or the next 2 weeks or the next month that my honourable friend will be back here to be able to update the chamber, update the country to allow us to recognize that things are happening. And as they're happening, sir, we will just work with the institutions, work with the people to make sure that we can arrange the insurance, we can arrange the financing, we can arrange all of the pre-approved planning to allow people, sir, to get on with the business of improving their lives and hopefully, sir, ensure that how communities and families connect with the future of Barbados as we're investing, that people will see the benefit, sir, the benefit of what is being bestowed upon them and their families, and that they too, sir, can become craftsmen of the fate of Barbados. And with those few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable. Honourable Member for St. Michael South East.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise in support of this very important piece of legislation. A piece of legislation which I believe seeks today to resolve a long-standing issue, which I believe is setting the tone for what I believe must be a decisive piece of legislation in settling something that for generations, I think both administrations have been trying to solve. We have tried, I think, unsuccessfully to be able to resolve this issue on both sides. And that is today, sir, the transfer of ownership from people who have been residing in what we refer to as the housing estates to allow them to finally own what we all speak of, but oftentimes have not been able to deliver, owning a piece of this rock. For years, both of the administrations, I believe, have also believed in a common truth, which is that we must move from just simply accommodating people to being able to allow persons to now have title to property, so that some of the basic things that for years people in whether it's the middle class or the upper class have been able to do with the ownership of property and security of tenure, that we now have a situation where ordinary people living in what is often perceived as vulnerable communities, that they now have the ability to have that title deed and to be able to say that they own the units that they have been living in, and certainly their families, for decades. There have been efforts on both sides through different mechanisms, different pieces of legislation, to be able to try to empower persons living in the housing estates over the years, sir. We have seen programs intended to extend ownership of housing. I believe there was the HELP program at one point. Then our acronym certainly was the HOPE program. But over the years, we have seen the general thinking being that we have to move people from where they are and put them into a position where they have that security of tenure. It is interesting in relation to the introduction of this bill, sir, that the honourable member spoke to the number of eligible units being close to 3,892 units, and the fact that fewer than 590 have been conveyed. So I believe that that is very telling in terms of the fact that clearly, while the intent has been there, the actual ability to execute has not necessarily met the objectives of the successive administrations. What has happened is that the mechanism to do the transfer was slow. It was also very complex, and in many cases it was dependent on a case-by-case legal process to be able to bring about transfer. I recall at times, sir, when there was much discussion about whether we should have a condominium-type structure to be able to convey the housing estates. A part of me used to feel as though there was not the intent to be able to allow people in these vulnerable communities to be able to own their own home. But I'm happy today, sir, that we have reached a point where we have, for the most part, overcome the hurdle of standing on a philosophy where we appreciate that by doing this simple act, we seek now to empower not just a class of persons, but by extension, entire communities who now can speak of owning their own piece of the rock. Instead of relying on what we would normally be accustomed to, the individual conveyances, this legislation takes a very modern and a decisive approach to the whole act of conveyancing. And by acting in the public interest, we have been able to simply acquire the properties through the state, immediately vest them in the qualifying tenants, therefore granting a marketable title that they can certainly be able to say they have no ownership. So now we don't have, after this legislation is passed, the long periods of processing that it would normally take for persons to be able to have to step forward and to be able to seek to claim title. It has removed the uncertainty that many people have had to battle with, not knowing whether or not this would ever come to fruition. And certainly I can tell that based on the fact that the Honourable Member Minister has indicated his intention following as soon as possible after this to be able to convey almost close to another 700, that I believe that we have finally found a mechanism to start the process of doing what we have always intended to do, in particular in these housing estates. So for that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have no choice, truthfully, but to support this particular initiative today. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the thing about it is that previous approaches, whether under either administration, accepted the principles of ownership, but relied on systems that clearly were not delivering it efficiently. And this bill moves that intention now to a state of being able to execute the intention that we all know and I believe have wanted for a long time. I recall a time where, I think it was prior to an election, letters of correspondence were sent to prospective tenants in units, whereby the hope was given to them that after an election, the intention was to be able to allow them, after a period of 20 years, to be able to own their homes. At that time, sir, I believe, again, you know, sometimes things happen prior to an election that ought not to happen, where we give hope to an electorate that if they vote for a political party, then they will see certain results. And of course, there's always those who live in hope. But I believe even back then, the details of how we were going to get from intention to execution may not have been fully considered. And so what then took place in the years which followed was a journey where we had to try to figure out how we were going to convey these houses, which needed electrical repairs to be done. How were we going to convey these houses which needed sewage systems to be corrected? How were we going to convey these houses where wells, for the most part, had not been properly maintained for years? How were we going to deal with the common spaces? Who was going to continue to maintain the common spaces? Because all of a sudden you were creating ownership of units that are, for the most part, often attached to each other. And therefore, these were the peculiarities that somehow boggled the lawyers as to how do we find ways to empower people in these vulnerable communities while at the same time bringing about the ownership that was desired. The reality, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that for many people, owning a home is a signal of stability. It is a level of pride that many people look forward to, that they aspire to. Sometimes it is the only access to a loan. In particular, I've seen people have to put up security for student revolving loans. Many of us who have practiced in the law courts know that sometimes when you have a son or daughter who may have gotten in trouble with the court, sometimes you need a little piece of security. I've spoken about this on both sides, sir, because this has troubled me for years, where the inability to deliver on these simple things have stopped people from being able to not even simply be able to stand surety and to be able to stand for a relative in a court of law, but being able to access basic financing because they did not have a simple title deed or conveyance to be able to bring before the courts or to be able to put up security to a financial institution. Sir, today we create history by this simple stroke of the pen and by this measure, because it now allows persons who want to even access educational opportunities for their families or for themselves, if they have to go there to be able to get some access to financing, for the first time now to be able to be in a position that they have that title deed, that they can put forward the security from that property to be able to access certain levels of financing. Sir, that is how intent becomes reality for ordinary people. The communities, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that are being impacted today will impact a number of communities. And I will say again, for the record, I have the largest housing estate, so this is deeply personal to me in terms of the start of a process that I have advocated for many years and will continue to advocate for, because I have seen what a simple piece of ownership can do for people in these communities to give them a level of stability that I believe we all must aspire to afford that opportunity to persons that we represent. So the communities that are impacted range from Deacon's Farm, Grisettes, Fernie Hurst, Silver Hill, Wotton, Golden Acre, Gall Hill, Bonnets, and of course, close to 192 homeowners in the Wildy area of the Pinelands community, from Bottom Close to Field Road to Factory Avenue. These are communities that in the initial stages, back in, I believe, the 60s, would have had, for the most part, certainly in the Wildy area and the Pinelands community, would have had investment by the state going into these communities to create opportunities for low-income housing for a number of persons. And these units have, for the most part, been sustained by the people who live in them. Let nobody fool you, sir. It isn't every time that you may call the relevant authorities that you get your door fixed or you get your windows changed, or that access to getting any of these things done is immediate. Sometimes people have had to dig into their resources, their own personal finances, to be able to do the things that was intended for the state to do for people. Equally, what we are doing now is placing the ownership of these units into the hands of these same people who for generations have had to do the minor repairs. Sometimes they've done their little extensions and they've had to wait to get their electrical upgrades on the extension to their houses. But for the most part, these individuals for generations have had the opportunity to look after these households. And I believe that by what we do here today, it gives them that comfort in knowing that that investment, in a sense, has really paid off. Perhaps the only pity is that it should have happened a bit sooner, sir. We are doing this act, and we're doing it responsibly by being able to make sure that we have covenants obviously in place. I believe in the conveyances, it will speak to the standards that are to be maintained as it does in other conveyances. We're going to obviously have to put in the protections for the actual infrastructure. And of course, the safeguarding for the access to the utilities, because the housing estates are peculiar, sir. In many instances, you have areas where, and you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, are well aware of this, because I know you would wish to speak in this debate today, but I will help to speak for you, and I'm sure all your other colleagues will try to do the same. But the reality is that sometimes, because government has not moved as fast as the people in these communities have found it necessary, because of the overcrowding in their homes, to have to go into their yards. For whatever space may be remaining in their yard, they have had to design spaces that have had to provide accommodation for the extension of their households. And in so doing, you have captured in those backyards oftentimes the wells and the sewage systems and the access to the key utilities, that because of the extension of their homes, you find a situation where the utility companies are unable, and certainly NHC, is unable to access the very utilities for those estates. So on a particular block, you may find that the problem of sewage is coming from one particular house that is complaining, but the truth of the matter is that you've got to dig up the entire yard of almost 6 or 7 other households and units to be able to get to treat the problem. These are some of the issues that I hope that the Honourable Minister and his team will certainly take into account, because I am not sure, and I am subject to correction, that all of these issues in relation to accessibility to key utilities and common services has fully been thought through. I hope so, sir, and I would hope the Minister can speak to that, or at least give the comfort that even if on the face of it, that it has not fully been ventilated, that attempts will certainly be made to ensure that we take a look at those common areas and how our utility companies and certainly the NHC is able to access the backyards to get to the utilities. I would hope, sir, that the other thing that must be taken into account is the fact that as we do these conveyances, that perhaps an approach can be taken to ensuring that we align boundaries. You have a number of palings in some very narrow areas in these communities. again, palings that have defined spaces, or persons have defined their spaces, not by any landmark per se, but because you might got a little bit of extra material and therefore you're going to drop the extension where you can to be able to take in as much space as you possibly can, sir. Therefore, as we seek to convey, there must be an element of understanding as to how people live, how people survive in communities. That doesn't simply only address the households or the blocks where there's no issue, but that we have a comprehensive program, a parallel program, trying to ensure that we upgrade and that we align those other blocks in communities and other estates where we can now bring some level of order. Because the one thing I understand about people, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that where there is no order, there will be disorder. And equally, where people appreciate that the government is trying to bring order to their lives, very often you will not get the resistance that you might expect. Because if I'm going to be the beneficiary of a piece of the rock, a piece of space, even if it may be a diminished space, I am usually willing in these communities to work with and to cooperate with the authorities to move back the paling, to move back the chicken coop, to move back the pig pens, to move back the clothing lines, to ensure that I then can get the benefit of this type of legislation. And I think all of us as MPs need to be able to echo that sentiment to the people of our communities, that this is intended as a benefit for them. And therefore, whatever cooperation is necessary within these types of estates, that we need to encourage people to so do. I would also ask of the Honourable Minister as well, that we give some thought to things like boundary walls. These are the partition walls that exist between the housing units. And on a block, you will find several boundary walls. In many cases, depending on the means of a particular household, you can find the entire wall breakdown. You can find that nobody has been able to put up no kind of paling, no kind of fencing, nothing to be able to separate the person's chickens from coming over by them. Or if the yard is in a total mess, you are going to have all the rat infestation coming in by you. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I know you can relate to this. These are things, they are simple things, but there must be a budget allocated as we move forward to be able to address these things, because the simple act of giving people a piece of the rock does not mean automatically that everybody in these estates has the means, has the revenue, has the income to be able to make good and continue to build out those properties. And I therefore feel very strongly that we must take this into account, and as I said earlier, understand the communities that we are seeking to impact. To middle class, upper class people, a conveyance is a gift from God. To people in vulnerable communities, it is a gift as well. But it also comes with responsibilities and financial responsibilities that not everybody will have the means to be able to take that conveyance and run with it. And therefore, we must look at that, whether through NHC or other mechanisms, to be able to ensure that we can continue to lift up those persons within these housing estates. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as we transfer ownership as well, while I speak to what I believe the state has to look at, I believe that this also comes with certain responsibilities on the, and on the part of the individuals. We have to look obviously at their responsibilities, and we need to walk people through it in terms of making sure that people can enjoy the quiet enjoyment of their home as well. But I do feel that things like small accessible loans to be able to improve the accommodation may be a consideration that the Minister of Finance and the economic team may want to consider, because that ensures that people can do the things on their own to upgrade what we have now vested in them. And I'm not talking significant sums of money, sir. I am talking about simple, small loans that allow people to be able, whether they want to take the responsibility of putting on the fence, putting up the fencing, or being able simply to pave the area in front of their house, which has not been paved since the estates have been built, So you have elderly people now having challenges being able to get out of their homes because the simple act of making the pathways accessible have not been addressed for decades. Therefore, we need, we've done it when I was Minister of Public Works. We did it in communities up in Eden Lodge and other places where, in addition to fixing the road, we went in and we made sure that especially where we had areas that had never been paved, we made sure that accessibility was part of the road improvement infrastructure within those vulnerable communities, sir. We also need to make sure that we confront what is a challenge for us all, which has been the illegal extensions to the units. Because while we respect the residents' efforts to be able to improve and to upgrade, because we can't build as fast as people would want, we have to make sure that those modifications do not compromise other structures, it doesn't compromise safety, and certainly that it is consistent with the plans for the actual estates as well, because we have a major issue in many of these estates with overcrowding. The bill, therefore, sir, must be understood in its historical context as well, because a lot of times we do these things and we believe that these things started today. And I will always speak of a philosophical underpinning of this political party as it relates to home ownership. Former leaders, the Grantley Adams, Tom Adams, have been instrumental throughout our history in seeking to improve the lot of ordinary people, to give opportunities, particularly coming out of the colonial era, to ensure that ordinary Barbadians who came out of the plantations, that they were able, through the Tenantry Freehold Purchase Act, to be able to have ownership of the lands on which they live, sir. It did not happen by accident. It was a belief that we as a people had to make sure that we corrected the wrongs of the past, similar to what we are doing here today. So the 10 cents per square foot for land was not by accident. It was by design, because we recognized back then that if we did not do these simple acts, that we were not able to enfranchise our people, sir. This is why our manifesto this year would have committed to some other basic things, apart from us saying that this piece of legislation was on the order paper before we even went into an election, and that it would be one of the first bills that would be debated whenever we had concluded the budget and the estimates. The fact of the matter is, sir, that we also have committed to things like de-risking mortgages for low-income families in order to allow people to be able to access loans and to make them more accessible. It is why this administration has continued to focus on things like specialized housing, making sure that we target vulnerability, that people who are in the disabled community, that they are given priority when we start to build out accommodation across the country. It is why we have said that we have to provide for the transitioning for children from our children's homes. It is why we have said that even people who have been in penal institutions, that they must be also provided for as well, because of the difficulties that people find adjusting back into communities as well, sir. This is a philosophy of this administration, and one that people must understand that what we do here today stands on the back of years of understanding that we have a responsibility to enfranchise our people and to make sure that we do not leave people where we have found them. This legislation also marks a clear relationship between the economic opportunities presented by this and our social outcomes. When we speak of the types of communities that are being empowered, the housing estates, sir, many of these communities face a number of challenges. There's a higher risk of social vulnerability in many of them, particularly amongst our youth. We know that they are densely populated communities. And it is not to single out any community. These are the facts, sir. Many of these communities of which we seek to empower today are some of our most densely populated areas across this country. There are also areas which, because of their vulnerability, you often find challenges in terms of the liming or the block culture, the concerns with the police, sir. That is the reality of what we speak of when we speak of some of these areas. That is not a judgment by any measure. It is a reflection of the current conditions. It is the conditions that have existed for generations across these communities. And therefore, why this bill matters is because it goes beyond housing. Because the reality is that ownership often changes outcomes. I have seen people, sir, that when you give them the opportunity to even move out of their communities and own a home, all of a sudden they behave differently. They behave differently because they can now put their clothes in a cupboard. They can now seat their children at a dining room table. They can now sit down in the comfort of a living room that doesn't have 15 other people struggling to be able to sit at the same table or the same furniture to be able to watch TV. We change circumstances by giving people these types of opportunities that they can build on. And for those who live it will understand, sir, where I am coming from. It changes behavior by being able to give people that lift up, to be able to allow families to build and to transfer wealth. A family that is able to get the title deed gives that parent the certainty that they can decide which child or children they want to transfer that property to. It means that it does not leave an entire household in confusion, because you can now, with that title deed, be able to determine how you are going to provide beneficiaries to be able to take over that particular unit. Because one of the most disturbing things, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the fact that we have a number of housing units across our communities where they are closed up because the families can't agree who's supposed to go forward to be able to take out the letters of administration because a family member decided that they were not going to leave a will, or that they were not going to put things in order in terms of who was going to succeed them in terms of beneficial interest, sir. This, with the right education, allows people to understand what they have and to be able to tidy up those things. Hopefully, it will also, and I know it doesn't come through legal aid, but maybe we need to also reflect on the situation where the division in families and the inability to agree as to who should go forward for the letters administration may require a particular, again, level of assistance to allow people to go forward to settle these issues so that these houses can be settled, whether in terms of being sold, whether in terms of being rented and the income distributed amongst families. But we need to be mindful that simply giving a conveyance does not automatically also give you the financial ability to be able to pay for the services that are required legally to tidy up these estates as well. The evidence also shows, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that secure tenure also contributes to stronger and more stable communities. And therefore, I believe that this legislation not only forms part of a wider program of empowerment by this administration, but it also allows us to reflect on a wider framework of programs. This administration, sir, has been making sure that in these same communities that we have been empowering people through the trust loan program. We've gone from $5,000 maximum to going up to $20,000, sir, giving young people across our communities the opportunity to be able to access financing and to be able to ensure that they can build out their businesses. Sir, that is what this administration has been able to do. We have also been delivering on improving skills because, again, this debate is not simply about home ownership alone, you know. The myriad of things that are as a government that we are seeking to do is with the absolute intention of improving the conditions of people who live in a number of these particular communities. We have been investing in revitalizing our community spaces, sir, making sure that we improve the community centers so that people have the opportunity to recreate in safe spaces. And we have obviously been making sure that we build out the housing programs. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to speak briefly to this because previous ministers of housing, including my colleague minister now, has spoken to the Lower Burney project. The Lower Burney project was intended from its inception to ease the densely populated nature of not only the Pinelands community, but the surrounding areas where we are seeing issues of vulnerability and pressure, sir. I know that we have had the opportunity to be able to acquire the land, but sir, I, like my constituents, we're thin in terms of being able to feel comfortable that we are at the stage of readiness where we can start to see equipment going in and road infrastructure being built out. I believe that that time has now come for us to make sure that we capitalize on the acquisition of that land, put whatever is needed to be in place to ensure that we can start the process of getting people out of the densely populated communities in which they reside, sir. I see it daily. It is a problem that we need to confront, and whatever joint venture arrangements need to be put in place to ensure that we have those communities built out, we need to move as a matter of urgency, sir. Space is a problem in vulnerable communities and in housing estates. Just a few days ago, I got a call from a resident because I believe it was NHC went into the Golden Rock area. A structure has been all of the boulders went in to create a foundation for a structure to be created. And where was this created, sir? It was created on a play park in the Golden Rock area. A play park. A recreational space for our children and our elderly to play. And why, when you ask the question of the young people, why is that they did it because for them, the opportunities to be able to find spaces, whether through housing or other means, to be able to build out businesses. They might want to do a car wash. They want to sell clothes, nothing illegal. So on the face of it, they have proceeded to find a space that was available to be able to build out, sir. We need to recognize that these densely populated areas become breeding grounds for all kinds of societal challenges. And therefore, I want to urge those who can hear me to move with a degree of urgency to be able to build out that which we have said for the last few years that we were intending to build out. I know that the process has started, but I'm simply making the call again on behalf of the residents of St. Michael Southeast who have complied with the surveys to find out where are the most vulnerable people in the community. The opportunities for being able to move persons who are in densely populated households must be done as a matter of urgency. We have no excuse. We have the land. We need to now move to building out the infrastructure that is necessary, sir. As I close, sir, I believe that this government has been at the forefront of expanding our housing development. We have many projects that are ongoing at different stages, but I think that the ones that we need to focus on in particular, because we have been, again, we've been guilty of this over the years where we speak of projects for low-income people. And then what we find is that the costs go up. The contractors then claim additional funding. And then what was supposed to be a low-income project turns into a middle-class project, making it out of reach for the very people that it was intended for, sir. I do not want to see the Lower Burney project become that, because I understand that the delays in being able to move people continues to create instability and the vulnerabilities in communities that can be avoided, sir. And I believe that I speak for all communities where these types of programs are necessary to be able to create housing to allow people to breathe a little easier. It is painful to see 16 people sometimes in a household, sir, with one mattress on the ground and in one room in the house. Well, they sleep in shifts, yes, but we have to understand what has been created, because some of these units were not built for this number of people. And therefore, that time has come, sir. I believe we can talk about the crime and all of these issues, but we must understand that what we do as a society and the urgency that we place to some of these things to bring stability are the things that make the difference in being able to settle people. When you have household conflicts because one person working, 6 other people not working, and people have to determine who going in the fridge to take out the food that is in the fridge, or when you have multiple households of children where the father is paying but the other children's fathers are not paying, sir. These are the things that create conflicts, and therefore housing is an important factor. It is not the only factor, but it is an important factor in settling households as well and avoiding the conflicts that we see continuously in communities that are in particularly dense communities across our island, sir. So I believe that we are on our way, but we are not quite there yet. But today's legislation is a very important and significant milestone in being able to accomplish the vision that we believe we must accomplish. And therefore, it is about ensuring that Barbadians are not simply housed, but that Barbadians are also empowered. Equally, that comes with a responsibility both on the state, but it equally comes with an opportunity for householders to behave differently as well once they have these additional rights as well, sir. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to commend this legislation and therefore ask for the support of all other honourable members in ensuring that we do the right thing in being able to empower our various communities. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for acknowledging me. Luckily, I believe that no matter when I get to my feet, that I will say things that the people of St. Michael South Central will find useful.
You're welcome.
So I thank you for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, I rise to support the legislation that is before this honourable chamber. I find it eminently consequential. And I think that sometimes, sir, we come to this place and we appear to be going through, we might appear to be going through certain motions. And I think that it is also a part of our responsibility and engagement and communication to make sure that people understand the transformational nature of some of what we come to this place to do. The honourable member who piloted this bill surely demonstrated that he understands the consequence, that he understands the contribution that this legislation makes to the development of this country. But both he and the member for Christchurch East Central, who spoke after him, also flagged for us certain other factors in which this legislation must be couched if it is to be as consequential as it has the potential to be. Before I get to some of those other factors, sir, and I trust that you will be as generous with me, making sure all of my points are made this morning as you have formerly been. But, sir, before I get to those other parts of the whole, I do think it is important as we bring this bill that deals with what we frame as terrace units, certainly what the initial Act of 2013 and the current bill make reference to, what we might call housing units or housing estates, that we also have to make clear, and I put this question to the Honourable Member for St. Michael West in his wrap-up, to clarify the status of other housing units, of other housing estates. There is an extent to which many Barbadians have been given the impression that as long as they occupy a Ministry of Housing, an NHC housing unit, that they are eligible for these arrangements. I think it has to be clarified the conditions, the terms and conditions under which each estate or each unit operates, for the avoidance of doubt and so that people can make the appropriate investments in how they wish to live. But I will say that from where I sit as a representative for St. Michael South Central, there are many times people come to me and say, I am under the impression, I was given the impression that I am eligible for rent-to-own arrangements. At a certain time, this will be conveyed to me, and if that is not the case for certain of the estates, then it is important that that be clarified. Equally, sir, this process that relates to housing units is part of a whole. And so the transfer of title as well under the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act of former plantation holdings in what I like to call urban villages. Sometimes we believe that villages are only in the countryside. I grew up in what I call an urban village. I grew up in St. Michael, in Haggett Hall, Carrington Village, Bannister Land, Delamere Land. This is village life. This is former plantation land. And we all know the circumstances under which these Barbadians came to be here on this land. But as this process proceeds, those people in Carrington Village, in Bannister Land, in Britton's Hill, and other places that also qualify for their lands to be transferred also wish, under the Rural and Urban Development Commission, to continue to be updated on the status of those conveyances. And I do, in my capacity, the only capacity the principal capacity that matters to me as the representative of St. Michael South Central, I do have to advocate for, even though it may not be an effort of the Ministry of Housing, this is one government, this is certainly one cabinet, and it is important that no single process overtake the other, because those individuals also have a right to understand what is happening with those conveyances. I am told from time to time that, as the representative, one should be in a position to make the necessary authority, the relevant authority, aware of those who qualify, and I'm happy to do that. I think that we, as a Barbados Labour Party government, are continuing the commitment that we've made, the covenant that we have made with the people of Barbados, certainly in comparison to the Democratic Labour Party when they had the opportunity so to do, and who conveyed very little or nothing. We are certainly holding to that covenant. And I think it is important to be able to continue to give clarity to that process. But, sir, there are also certain parts of this whole that I feel it is important to be able to speak to as Minister with some responsibility for planning and development in Barbados. The truth is, as we are seeing more and more, it is no longer possible to separate the question of housing from the question of lands, from the question of planning, from the question of traffic. That is no longer possible. I'm not sure that it ever was. And so one of the things that we have certainly satisfied ourselves in the Planning and Development Department is that the forward planning function of the department has to do more heavy lifting. And I know that if those in the forward planning section of the department are hearing me now, they are saying, give me some resources. And they are correct. And they are correct because forward planning is planning. Let me tell you what I mean, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The practice of waiting for an application, receiving an application, and having this case-by-case approach to considering and approving applications, perhaps in a country of our size, with all of the competing demands on land, on space, perhaps that does not work well. What we have realized is that there is a need to, certainly for key areas like Waterford. There's some in here that call it all kinds of fancy things, but I'm going to stick with the name that's on the map. Waterford, the area where now we have a geriatric hospital, a new geriatric hospital, where the botanical gardens are expanding, where there's all kinds of new development that is taking place. It means that we cannot leave to chance any other kinds of development that might come up. There are going to be demands of the area that relate to water, that relate to traffic, that relate to sanitation, that mean that we have to determine that this area is a key development area that must attract the attention of the officers, of the experts in forward planning to say, okay, rather than sit and wait for this thing to hit us like a train, let us see how we plan what will come. That is true for the Waterford area. That is in particular true for the QEH expansion. Now, let me say, for the avoidance of doubt, as I stand on my feet here on the 31st of March, 2026, in this honorable place, that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital is part of a community. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital is part of a community. And right opposite sits the wonderful community of Campaign Land, Bannister Land, Delamere Land. The QEH expansion now proposes to go over to the Enmore side and build out some key infrastructure there to improve accessibility of services to the people of the country and to be able to solve some of the challenges of the provision of health care that Barbadians have been telling us need to be solved. But the Queen Elizabeth Hospital is part of a community. The people in those communities expect to have opportunities at work, at business development, and at other parts of the engagement of that project and of what it wants to achieve. But further to that, as you go through Bannister, Delamere, Campaign Land, up into Belleville, you are now talking about a medical campus. And the member for Christchurch West knows well what I mean. And so we have always said that, and we know that the healthcare model is a public-private healthcare model. And there is much work to be done, certainly when it comes to healthcare financing, to make that a reality. Because it can't be a public-private healthcare model just because there's a public facility and they're private providers. It has to be that we unify those two players. Remember Christchurch West has particularly strong feelings about this, and I thank him for them. But that if we are expanding into Enmore, we are expanding through the community and bringing the community along into Belleville and even up into Colamarock. This is a medical or a healthcare campus. And it means that there's certain planning that has to be done for that purpose. There is a role for forward planning in determining what is the carrying capacity for the things that we're doing And how are we able to build out that carrying capacity? Even when it comes to certain investments in the tourism sector. We see what is going on in the north of the island, the west coast into the north of the island. And we know that we are going to have to ensure that areas like water and sanitation and other services that are required to support that are in place if this is truly a sector that we want to see continue to grow. The same is true, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, for how we treat housing units, terrace units, housing estates in Barbados. We have the notion sometimes, I know that none of us in this honourable place suffers from that, but we sometimes have the notion that the private sector looks a certain way. The private sector is anybody who is in private business, who is in entrepreneurship. And it means that there may be certain expectations that people have for the ways in which they can build out their homes to also support their business. One of the things that we know, sir, for a fact, is that in circumstances where women who are also caregivers, providers of care in households, the extent to which they are able to work, in some cases, closer to their homes, means that they can at once participate in the formal economy and participate in the household economy, which they are doing anyway. And I say household economy because it is an economic space. It is productive. So we understand that sometimes people will want to be able to work and live in the same space. But when we talk about rights and opportunities, we must talk about responsibilities. The notion that we do not have to have ordered development because there's a segment of the population that cannot sustain the expectation of order is a fallacy. And it does no justice to working class communities in this country. I'm going to repeat myself. The notion that working class communities should not and cannot live and work and carry out business in an ordered way, or should not be expected to, is a judgment in itself. So this notion that, well, we are not going to have any expectations of certain people in this country does no favors to us or to them. I wholly accept the point made by the member for Christchurch East Central in his intervention, that we have to be able to give predictability to people living in these units. I recall a conversation when I was first Minister with responsibility for planning that had to do with providing expansion guidelines, if to the extent that they are permissible, to the extent that expansion is permissible under these agreements, that we give expansion guidelines directly to those tenants, so that whatever, as the member said, might be the permitted development, if there is some permitted development, whatever that permitted development is, that we communicate that in advance, or we communicate that as part of the conveyancing, but that we do seek to bring order and to maintain order, because guess what? It is that order that benefits people's well-being. It is that order that helps them live in more productive and useful ways. And so I reject the notion, and I've said it in this honourable place before, that working class communities cannot be subject to that kind of order, because that is another kind of marginalization in which I will have no part. And to that point, there's another piece of work that the Planning and Development Department is working on, which is forward planning for vending zones, or forward planning to support the vending policy. The member for St. James Central and I have had some conversations on this. And I gather that, I won't preempt anything that he may wish to say, but I gather that he is in agreement that Just like with any other legislation, just like with this legislation, the vending policy has to be supported by the other parts of what we do. And so there also has to be some predictability in those vending zones, how they operate, but also to give people an opportunity, if their home environment does not support the kind of activity that they want to do, like a mechanic or a car wash. If their home does not support that, then the vending zones, which we are erecting in each community, so you not even have to pay any bus fare. You may be able to walk across the road, but the point is that you are doing it in the designated area for that activity. We started that with previous ministers of industry. I was able to expand it when I was minister responsible for industry. The member for St. Michael North, I believe, initiated the activity through Export Barbados for those mechanic bays, so that people who want to be involved in that industry can do it in the appropriate way. Sir, this is important for a number of reasons. And I think we have to have some conversations with ourselves in the mirror. The member for St. Michael South has been hitting the road to hear from Barbadians about traffic management. As we began this new term, that was the conversation on everyone's lips. It has certainly been a part of the productivity conversation in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and it is a part of the conversation that the member, as Senior Minister for Infrastructure, has to contend with and is beginning to do so, and to hear from Barbadians. And let me say that I don't think that the traffic management conversations were ever intended to be a conversation about flyovers. It's a conversation about traffic management writ large. So let us disabuse ourselves of the notion that this is a flyover conversation. It was never that. That was always a potential solution. But we all know that there are several solutions that are involved. But those efforts relate to these efforts as well. So the same area that I am talking about us doing as a key development area, we talked about Waterford as one, but another key development area related to the QEH expansion is that QEH, Bannisterland, Belleville area. But let me tell you something, sir, that is happening in that area. Everybody knows that one of the bottlenecks coming from Carrington Village, Belmont Road, up into Colomorock is Pine Road. One of these days, we're going to be able to have visual aids in here so that they can have a pointer and show what I mean. But Pine Road is gridlock at certain times of the day. Many other places in Barbados, too. But one of the recent sources of that gridlock has been one or two new businesses, small businesses, informal businesses, that have established, and people are pausing to be able to patronize the establishment. Now, I support with every fiber of my being the right of those individuals to start a business. That is what we want. That is what we want to see. What we also want is to be able to be given the opportunity to give the appropriate guidance to individuals for where is the best place and under what conditions that they can carry out their business. One of the reasons that the Planning and Development Department has to oversee these kinds of things is that sometimes when you put a business in a particular location, traffic has to stop there. And when traffic stops there, it may create a hazard, it may create a danger to pedestrians and to other motorists, it may create a gridlock. And as much as other Barbadians want you to succeed, they also want to get to work on time. They also want to get to pick up their children on time before the school gate closes. And so let us help each other. If there's one appeal that I make, It is let us help each other have the level of well-being and live the kinds of lives that we want. So, forward planning, sir, for permitted development for estates, that is on our list. Planning policy for vending zones and vending, that is on our list. Being able to understand the traffic, sanitation, water needs for each of these key development areas, that is on our list. And it will necessitate, I am pretty sure, further amendments to the Planning and Development Act, on which we are working now, to be able to facilitate all of this. But, sir, perhaps the final thing I will say in this regard is this. And before I move on to that, I do have to say that in relation to the permitted development in any units, to the extent that there is meant to be such, and certainly the member for St. Michael West and I will have those conversations with our teams. But I think that there's also a pathway here to be able to have a particular track for these kinds of efforts. Let me tell you what I mean. The Planning and Development Department in 2019, when we brought the new legislation, we set ourselves some timelines. Timelines for planning applications that involve an environmental impact assessment, timelines for other kinds of major applications, but also timelines for simple residential applications. In general, the Planning and Development Department finds that it is meeting the timelines for residential, simple homes or simple home expansions. I say that because I want to give people the assurance that if you do need to make an application for some kind of expansion to your home or some kind of new build for simple residential, that it is likely to go according to the short timeline that we have established. But further to that, if we are able to give some predictability and be able to get some of these things more quickly and easily through the system, we can just facilitate fast tracking for major developments. The private sector is the private sector. We are here to serve all Barbadians. And so we have to look at whether there's a possibility that we have a special track for regularizing these kinds of investments. Finally, sir, I am loath to disagree with my very good friend from St. Michael West. And I don't really think it's a disagreement. I think it is perhaps a variation in perspective. But I do think that the idea that rent, that there is no place for rent, that idea perhaps does not allow us to completely modernize our approach to accommodation. Ownership matters. Ownership matters, and that is the point of this economic enfranchisement mandate of this government. I think that just as we are looking at all kinds of solutions for traffic and movement and infrastructure and all of those things, we have to be able to accommodate all kinds of solutions for housing and accommodation, and to realize that there are also many kinds of ownership. We have been saying that when we talk about establishing a junior stock exchange or being able to create vehicles in which Barbadians can invest, because even though I may be paying rent, I may at the same time be able to have other kinds of productive investments that are earning me a dividend, and that will mean that my family still has something that they can take up when I am gone. Now, they may choose to buy a home with what I am able to leave for them. That is their choice. But let us understand that the rental market is a market. It is a legitimate market. And there is a time in our lives where some of us may decide rental works for me now, and home ownership may not work for me now. Home ownership may work for me later, or a different kind of instrument, a different kind of financial investment may work for me now. So I support entirely the ownership mandate of the Ministry of Housing and of this government. Ownership of something matters. Ownership of boss bonds, ownership of investment in some kind of special purpose vehicle, investment in some kind of hotel project. That matters. I do think that we have to be able to get frank with ourselves about what is the kind of accommodation mix, rental and ownership and lease and others, that works for our economy. Now, the final point I will make before I take my seat is that that also means that we have to concern ourselves with the condition of rental properties that are put on the market. Because I will tell you from where I sit in St. Michael South Central, some of these rental spaces, you have no right asking somebody for money for the condition in which I see some of these places. And we have to be able to bring the two things together. We have to be able to make sure that owners, landlords have rights, while they also demonstrate some responsibility to keep the property in good working order. You're a tenant, you got to keep the people's place good. You're a landlord, you got to keep the place in good order so that people can live dignified lives. So, sir, I wholly support this legislation. I think that it helps, as all good legislation does, as all good policy does, it helps trigger for us some of the other ways in which we need to step up to meet the member for St. Michael West in his very progressive agenda. We are inspired by it, and we make the commitment so to do. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you.
Honourable member for St. James
Central. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I promise you that I'm not going to detain your Honourable House for more than an approximate 5 to 10 minutes at the outer limit. And I want to just join this debate, first of all, by congratulating the Honourable Minister who piloted this, this very important matter through the House. And there's one point about which I think, having listened to some of my colleagues, that I would want to focus upon. And I do so, I think the Honourable Member who preceded me, one of the Honourable Members who preceded me, talked about thinking aloud. I believe the time has come, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for us to give serious thought to the way in which we must now hold the hands of the people in the communities who are benefiting from this initiative and help take them to what must be the next level of personal independence and community development. The history of these housing areas, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, if we are to be absolutely candid with each other, has been one in which the government has had a paternalistic relationship with poor people in the community, and you give them low-income housing. The National Housing Corporation, I have no doubt, would have tried its best, but in many cases, either it was historically mismanaged or underfunded, and so therefore the follow-up that is necessary, that was necessary, was never really done in an adequate way. We have wells that have not been cleaned. We have common areas that are virtually in a disastrous state. We have people, sir, who want to expand their homes legitimately, but have never been given a proper framework within which to plan that out. We have there are rental units, Mr. Deputy Speaker, some paid for, others not paid for, some maintained, others not maintained, and it goes on and on. And I think the Deputy Prime Minister made a very good point at a micro level as to what the day-to-day lived existence can be and has been. Now, sir, we cannot emancipate people from the shackles of that existence simply by saying, here is a mortgage, here is an ownership right, and leave it alone. I believe, Mr. Speaker, sir, that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that what we see in all of these units really, sir, are contained, self-contained units, inevitably linked side by side to each other, under what may now be divided by party walls now, but not always divided. So we've had history in the history of this country, sir. We've had one unit catch fire on one side, and many others feel the ripple effect because the party walls were not put in. They are now put in, Mr. Speaker, sir, I believe in most of the units. But, sir, there has to be a way forward so that you build community in a sensible way. What I dislike about Barbados, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and let me be very frank with this House, what I've come to dislike about Barbados is that we have a country where we have one set of rules for one set of people, invariably people who are better off, and then another set of rules for another set of people who are treated as lesser mortals, though born and bred brothers and sisters of this country, citizens all, but treated as lesser beings. So we have a condominium act where people who do not necessarily look like you or I, sir, may very often find their habitat, and they live in the condominiums pursuant to legislation called the Condominium Act of Barbados that allows for them, sir, in a structure which is almost identical in design to many of the units, sir, to be able to have their own self-contained place, but that self-contained place, sir, is subjected to a different type of developmental treatment so that the folks who are in there are treated as though they can have a body corporate to look after the common areas, which might be the place where you park your car, which might be the same areas where you have walkways in the unit, sir, that are not maintained, the areas where there is sewage, sir, or sewage facilities that are not maintained, wells that are not cleaned. In some of the high-rise that we have in Barbados, there are elevators, sir, which may or may not be well maintained. But for the condominium purposes, sir, we say to the same Barbadians, though not to the same class of people, and that is the operative word in this, class, we say to a different class of people, sir, we trust you and believe that you can come together and work together and that you can form an association which will be the administrative association or the body corporate to keep the common areas of the property in good repair. And we believe, sir, that you and you alone are able to deal with matters of insurance, while others, sir, apparently are incapable of understanding what insurance is and how you treat the matter of insurance, because by virtue of the stature of their status of their birth, they are incapable, so we treat them as being able to understand that. And that some people, sir, are able to comply with orders that might be issued by the state with respect to maintenance or effecting repairs, while, sir, other people are unable to deal with that. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it goes on and on. Anybody, sir, who is given the opportunity and the guidance can plan out capital improvements for the place where they live. I get it. I get it that more humble folk may need to have a Ministry of Housing that holds their hand and that will have some people to work with them in much the same way that we have found people to work with small business people so as to help them understand and navigate certain rules and certain requirements that are necessary for the formulation and maintenance and execution of good business practice in Barbados. The same principle can apply to the housing sector, sir. The same principle of collaboration with poor people, the same principle and commitment to uplift poor people. Why is it that we can have a Condominium Act that speaks, sir, to the sensible management of a common space, the sensible management of a set of units under one roof, Mr. Speaker, sir, but we cannot have that applied to the homes which exist. And let me say, Redmond Village is one such area. And I, sir, I'm not going to speak too extensively to the fact that the name Redmond Village was not called in the minister's presentation. He and I will speak about that in a more quiet manner in a different place. I wouldn't do that to the minister publicly. But I do note that Redmond Village was excluded. And that, sir, that omission put me in a mood to say the things that I'm going to say here today. Because I genuinely believe that we can't have one set of laws for the Medes, another set of laws for the Persians, and that can't work. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, what is it then specifically about the Condominium Act? It does many things, and I'm not saying we have to apply it in its totality to housing units across Barbados, but certainly there can be a body corporate formed with regard to those who live now and own units in housing estates. There's absolutely no reason, sir, where we cannot entrust to the people who live in the units the duty of creating a little management team that will look at issues such as keeping the lights in the corridors on. Look at issues such as making sure that the place when it needs repair can be repaired. There's nothing, sir, that stands in the way of us working with people to ensure, sir, that their investments are insured. These are conversations that we must have with ordinary Barbadians, Mr. Speaker, sir, if we are to ensure that they continue to be carried on a journey of upward social mobility and upward development. And Mr. Speaker, sir, where the Condominium Act speaks to the establishment of funds with regard to dealing with some of the minor administrative expenses, I know the first thing some people will say, oh, but them poor, and they ain't going to be able to raise the money to do that. There's no reason, Mr. Speaker, sir, why the Ministry of Housing cannot assist in dealing with some of those administrative things if it is that we're going to benefit from some of the massive investments that have been made in Barbados, where we have now laundry facilities in some of these units, where we have, Mr. Speaker, so as I said, elevators put into some of these units, where you have stairwells and so on that need to be maintained and lit and that type of thing. Mr. Speaker, sir, why would it not make sense now to start to look at creating the legislative framework that enables us to take those communities to the next level? Point number one. Point number two, Mr. Speaker, as I said to you, I don't want to detain you for a long time. But again, I am concerned about the Barbados which we may unintentionally shape. That Barbados where you will have one sort of level of access for some people and another type of access for others. And Mr. Speaker, I feel very strongly about this. You know, the investment of the day, where everybody with money in the country wants to be, where everybody with sense around the world, S-E-N-S-E, around the world wants to be, is to be able, sir, to be in the business of renewable energy. Here in the Caribbean, obviously, we have a flying advantage because we have lots of sunshine, we have lots of wind. And Mr. Speaker, sir, you know, because you see it, that there are the well-to-do of Barbados who spend every Sunday evening driving around this island looking for places where they can make yet another investment in renewable energy. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I see it happening across the homes that are middle class and upper middle class, and indeed the upper class of Barbados. Where I am not seeing it, Mr. Speaker, sir, is in the villages of Barbados. And I feel, Mr. Speaker, that in a country where we have said that we want to democratize energy, that we have to find a way of making sure that those folks who are the more humble of our society are not deprived of the opportunity to benefit from the investment. or access to the investment. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have to make sure that they're not deprived of the opportunity of access to the financial opportunities and financial harvests to be gained from the investment. And third, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have to make sure that they are not the ones who are placed in a position where they are disproportionately burdened by the cost of the investment. In other words, sir, there are some people who can end up paying more for energy as we go forward simply because they don't have access to the renewables, and there are others who are already laughing all the way to the bank because they get to the bank already, laughing all the way through the rest of their journey because, Mr. Speaker, sir, they have already benefited financially. So we have to find a way of leveling this playing field. And I do believe, sir, that part of the conversation that the Ministry of Housing must have, because when you're fixing units, sir, and you're doing the repairs and so on, and preparing to part company with them so that the owners can now be able to stand on their own 2 feet, in much the same way as the Ministry of Housing has its policy for there to be the photovoltaics on roofs, and roofs start to help people pay a mortgage in other parts of Barbados which are having housing development, sir. Why is it that we do not also facilitate a same approach within the housing estates? And to the extent, sir, that it is not possible in any housing estate, then it becomes absolutely important for us to make hay while sun shines. This party, this government, sir, came to office on a campaign of you creating a unit trust approach, which will be seen at Lambert's wind energy farm, which is $180 million of investment. But the unit trust, sir, will allow any Barbadian, from the most humble to the most wealthy, to buy into a unit that is their own. And that unit, sir, gives them a right to be able to have a share of the proceeds of that investment. And we have to find similar ways, sir, of ensuring that working class Barbadians, sir, who are owners of their homes, are able to benefit from the renewable energy journey. It cannot be a journey, sir, that only applies to some houses in Barbados and not to others. That applies to some housing concepts in Barbados and not to others. Worse yet, that applies to some classes of housing in Barbados and not to others, and in some geographical locations of Barbados and not to others. And that, Mr. Speaker, sir, is the concern that I have. So my intervention, sir, as I pledged, is a very brief one, and on both of the 2 counts, it is one, sir, which seeks to bring equity, fairness, justice, and fair play. And I urge on the Ministry of Housing a vision that is democratic in nature, inclusive in character, and supportive of the upward mobility of the people of Barbados as a whole. I am obliged, Speaker.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me first start by saying that home without title is bricks and beams. A home with title represents hope and dreams. And I don't have to reverse my mind 100 years ago to say that those who came up with that old adage is perfectly correct, but it's the lived reality. Hope, that long-for hope that Barbadians who live in these estates asked for, today, thanks to the Member of Parliament for St. Michael West, has become a reality. That long-for dream, that long-for Barbadian or Bajan dream to own piece of Iraq, Mr. Deputy Speaker, thanks again to the Member of Parliament for St. Michael West and the government, which I am proudly a part of. That long-for hope now is a reality for many Barbadians. A reality, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, for persons who operate in the heart of Christchurch, those in Christchurch West Central. Persons in Gaul Hill. I heard a Member of Parliament alluded to the fact that there are 14 persons in Gaul Hill thus far. as part of the project thus far, because you're going in phases, who will benefit from this new bill, which allows, first of all, the NHC to acquire under special provisions on the Constitution's Section 16.4, once it is for public interest, for NHC to acquire those properties and then vest them in persons who qualify once they have reached the threshold with reference to the length of time they were renting and the fact that they will comply and they have no encumbrances as it relates to money owed or whatever. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is the right time to do the right thing. And I want to say to Barbadians, and especially my constituents, that we are happy and we want to thank the Member of Parliament, because I'm their conduit and their voice in here, for keeping a promise that started as a painful exercise under the last administration, one which saw units being administered to persons one at a time. It was laborious. It had a lot of legal challenges, administrative challenges, and for this government to find an innovative and seamless way to allow Barbadians to have a tangible stake in this country, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am proud and happy. It has ensured that every single chamber of my heart is beating faithfully today for the people of Christchurch, West Central. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, this is not only about owning a piece of the rock for Barbadians. This is about intergenerational transfer of wealth, intergenerational transfer of assets, intergenerational transfer of hope, intergenerational transfer of dreams. Because with ownership, persons can transfer in will or whatever to family members, to their children. It allows Barbadians to have security as it relates to loans and other interests that they may be involved in. They have a house that they can put on the market to secure other investments. Now, if this is not the true, unequivocal, and unreserved definition of empowerment, I don't know what is. But I want to say that this is the full trust of a government who said from the inception that it is our primary mandate to empower Barbadians, especially those who were not, in previous alliterations, be given the opportunities to have, feel, and live the Barbadian dream. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, we have been doing with Usain Bolt pace. I may say Jolino Hamlin pace now, who represents the school that has as its mantra, fear God, think clean, and aim high. But we have operated with alacrity to ensure that we right the wrongs in this country. And only yesterday, you would have seen and heard from the Member of Parliament of St. James North, the breakthrough moment, he called it momentous, when we have reinstated for the first time in 12 years, the terms leave for our teachers, much deserved term leave. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a government that is correcting the wrong in this society. and ensuring that Barbadians are looked after in a special way. And the way which we think that is adequate for the test of times. So whether it's the budgetary considerations that you would have heard over the last 4 weeks or so, or what we heard from the Member of Parliament of St. James North yesterday, this government is living proof that we will ensure not only the most vulnerable, but all Barbadians get a tangible stake in this country. But, Mr. Speaker, there are some concerns for me, and I want to air my voice so that persons will know that it is not business as usual. And you have to be mindful of the way how we develop in these same constituencies and these same areas. Oftentimes you see persons building on structures. We understand there's congestion, and persons operate out of necessity. And we understand it because we who represent these constituencies recognize that this is a problem, has been a problem for years. But I would just implore persons to be conscious that a lot of the areas between homes, between units, are areas that persons use to traverse. Areas that may be used for emergency vehicles. Areas where you may have water storage facilities. We know the issues with wells and well covering, and a lot of those areas between houses and units have wells. And I want persons to be mindful when building and when putting up structures that are not necessarily sanctioned by the planning department, because it could very well cause adverse effects, not only on your property, but on your person as well. And, Mr. Speaker, although there is limited space, I think that it is time that innovation becomes the order of the day. We had a community garden competition only last year, and one of the persons who came in, either second or third, came from Bonnex. Community beautification competition. And it says a lot, because what it tells me is that, albeit there's limited space, that with the right creativity and innovation, we could beautify our spaces, create that green, clean and green atmosphere. I have witnessed persons transform their homes, their units, where the colors that you see both inside and outside represent a standard that could be used any place in Barbados, any district in Barbados. And I must tell you, when you go in these units and you see the furniture and the way how persons decorate, you'll be amazed at how well these persons are able to create an atmosphere where they feel comfortable in their homes, and rightfully so. And I say their homes because that is what we are looking to do. Give them their rightful title. This is not now a want. This is a need. And further than need, we think that this is their right, the right to ownership. And that is why the Member of Parliament for St. Michael West has done what he did this morning, because it is the right of those persons after occupying for 20 years to be able to have the settlement of mind and the equal mind to live and dream the Barbadian dream. Mr. Speaker, it's very simple for me, because I unreservedly, unequivocally support this bill And I want to say to the Member of Parliament for St. Michael West that the people of Christchurch West Central are equally happy. And they want to say to you through me that for them it is crystal clear that you're doing the right thing. I'm obliged.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 5 minutes past 2.
The question is that this House be suspended until 5 minutes past 2. All those members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. They think the ayes have it. This House now stands suspended until 5 minutes past 2.